Hey Dungebags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and today I'll be reviewing the second studio album from the American DJ and producer Wolfgang Gartner. This one's called 10 Ways to Steal Home Plate. Now, in large part, Wolfgang Gartner is one of the people that got me heavily into the electro scene with singles like Illmerica, Forever, Channel 42 with Deadmau5, and Wolfgang's Fifth Symphony. Now, I didn't really love the Illmerica album, I'll admit. I did love the lead single off of it, obviously, Illmerica. In this hiatus between Illmerica and 10 Ways to Steal Home Plate, Wolfgang Gartner has apparently been going through a lot of health issues, which explains kind of why he hasn't been on the scene, primarily only dropping a couple singles like Hounds of Hell with Tommy Trash, Piranha, Anaconda back in 2013. And honestly, when he dropped Turn Up, I actually didn't hear about it, which was the first single from this album. And when I finally did hear it, I was a little bit disgusted. I've actually gotten used to it, and I'm pretty okay with the track at this point. It's different for him, but you can definitely hear his signature sounds by probably the second or third listen around. With this album, I can say I was expecting a lot more, being a producer on the rank of Wolfgang Gartner, one of my role models in this scene. What we finally get with 10 Ways to Steal Home Plate is a fairly short album that doesn't take too many twists, other than Turn Up, for example. Doesn't necessarily feature any amazing collab partners on this. I was excited to hear the A-Track collab, which ended up being fairly disappointing. Just kind of your standard big room electro house kind of track, and it's a very weak closer in my opinion. This album isn't at all bad in my opinion, it's just fairly average and not exactly living up to what I would have expected from Wolfgang Gartner after a 5-year hiatus. Looking for You is your standard progressive house track that you would have expected from Wolfgang, and I think it had a lot of potential, but ends up just being so short that it kind of destroys whatever potential it did have. Hurricane Slurricane is actually one of the cooler tracks on this album, kind of featuring a 90s hip-hop kind of sound, all while blending it into this modern electronic music sound, and easily one of my favorites on the album. Saved also isn't a bad track on this album. It kind of reminds me of 2013, 2012's electronic music sound, kind of relating to progressive house, which makes it pretty enjoyable, just kind of remembering that year and how I was really getting into electronic music that year. Replay It kind of tries to take this really funky house sound, and the vocals end up being fairly annoying to me. The production value wasn't extraordinary in my opinion. Unholy was one of the first singles from this one, and I actually do enjoy it quite a bit. I think the vocal guest from Bobby Saint made this a very enjoyable track, as well as the lead synth in this one also makes for a extremely unique kind of track, and Cobra Effect also did a really nice remix of that one, and make sure to check it out if you haven't yet. One of the more interesting takes on the track. Y.W.M.O is one of the most memorable tracks from the album, really taking on this funk approach, this really rememberable vocal line from Gene Noble. I actually thought this was sampled from something else because it seemed so familiar somehow. Really enjoyable track, honestly, and one of my favorites. Faded is also fairly rememberable as well, really taking more of that 90s hip-hop sound that I mentioned earlier. Then we continue into Feel Right featuring J Hard. I've been a fan of J Hard ever since his single with Vice Tone, Follow Me, and I think his vocals work absolutely fantastic on this one. They're just so euphoric, and although people are probably going to complain that this is one of the, like, oh, it's just progressive house standards, this really takes me back to the times that I was really starting to get into electronic music and why I love Wolfgang Gartner in the first place. Easily one of my favorites on the album. Like I said, this one is a fairly average album. I think it's probably a little bit better than, kind of reflecting on the different tracks of this one, and I think Wolfgang Gartner could have put out a lot better of an album after a 5-year hiatus. Like I said, I do feel bad for him and his health issues, but as such an amazing producer, I think he could have expanded a little more. There are a couple ones that are really bugging me on this one, like Replay It and Looking For You, but for the most part this one's a fairly solid album, and something that was fairly enjoyable for me to listen to, and I think has a little bit more replay ability than a lot of the albums I've heard this year. I'm gonna go ahead and toss this one a solid 6. At the beginning of the day, when I went to give this one a rating, I was actually going to give it a 4.5, so my opinion has drastically changed over the course of this review, just kind of reflecting on the way I review things differently. I think this one was fairly good for the most part. There's only a couple tracks I really didn't like, and a couple of those weren't even that bad. It was just like certain picks I had with them. So honestly, I think Wolfgang did a good job with this one. He could have done a lot more, obviously, but I think for the most part this is a solid attempt. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think about the record? Make sure to listen to it if you haven't yet, and suggest any albums that are coming out soon that you might want me to review. I've got a lot more coming up in the next couple months. And anyway, I'll see you guys later. Peace.